Hey, what's up guys? This is Krishna here. Welcome to this exciting tutorial on Blender Cycle Shader for Houdini Axiom Fire. Now, before I get into this, I want to just share with you a website, which is Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, and that's protecting marine wildlife worldwide. Okay, consider browsing their website and consider donating to them. They're actually doing God's work and defending our oceans across the world. So check them out, right? Right, so this tutorial is for guys who do not have Redshift and followed the Realistic Fire Axiom series playlist or tutorial series. And because I rendered that fire using Redshift and Blender Shader or Cycle Shader is a free alternative GPU renderer for Redshift, okay? So you can, of course, use Mantra to render it, but Mantra is a little bit slow because of CPU, but it is extremely good. But in this tutorial, I'm only going to show you Cycle Shader, all right? Let's jump right into it. So first, here's Houdini file, and we need to transfer the fire, grid, and rubber toy across to Blender. So I've already done that, okay? So I'm just going to show you how. If I go into Axiom Setup, I've basically used a fire cache here, or file cache, and I exported .vdb, okay? That's important because if you don't export this as a VDB file, you cannot import it into Blender, all right? Next one is I used ROP Alembic output to export the rubber toy connected here, and the rubber toy is actually animated at this level because you can see that there. So just choose render frame range and save wherever you want to. I've already done that. A single output.abc is more than enough. You don't need to put a $F in here, okay? So I also exported, let's say, grid the same way. Okay, use ROP output. Finally, I exported the cam. I didn't export light. I didn't need to, and I don't know if you can. Anyway, for cam, you go into File, Export Alembic, and then you can choose cam. It looks like you can select light dome, but it doesn't matter. I'm not going to use it because it's dome light anyway. Cam 1, accept pattern, and then you can choose frame range if your cam is animated. Mine is not, so I'm just going to use current frame and export it. I've already done that. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this. Okay, so the exported files are here. These are cam1 ABC, grid, and rubber toy ABC. And sim is where my VDB files are. Okay, so that is done. Okay, let's move straight on to Blender. So here's a brand new scene. Okay, where we got a cube and a light, which are default stuff. I'm just going to select all of them. Oops. Select all these three and press delete. Okay, good. Save it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and import items one by one. Alembic, grid. Actually, can I import all three at once? Maybe I can. Import. Oh no. No, I don't want to do that. All right. Import Alembic, I'll do one by one. So first is grid. Yep, got it. Second is, where's Alembic? Cam. And if I press 0, yep, okay, it sets it up. And then the third is the rubber toy. Okay, so now if I scroll, yeah, it's animating, which is perfect. Okay, good. And then the next one is our VDB itself, all right? So I'm going to press Shift and hold A and go to Volume, Import Open VDB, and I'm going to go ahead and choose that file or sequence of files. Okay, select everything, import. Good. So if I've got this as well. This is called Axiom Setup, even though it's a rubber toy. That's because it takes its name from the main container, okay? So in the object level. So I'm just going to rename this to rubber toy. The idea is to keep it as close as to Redshift render as possible, but certainly I've made some modifications density wise in Blender, so it looks much deeper. Okay, so of course with Redshift you can play with the density values as well. All right, good. Let's jump in. So if I click on Fire Catch, which is our VDB, you got this icon here, and you got your density, temperature, and velocity showing up, which is good. Now I actually rendered out 240 frames, but I'm not going to bother with rendering all of the frames. I'm just going to show you one frame. So I think 44 is really the one frame that I really like the most. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and render that. So if I now click on this icon here, which is render, it's going to come up with nothing. And the reasons for it, obviously, one is that it's got no material. And the second one is that it's still sitting at render engine EV. I'm going to change it to cycles. I'm going to click render again. Again, nothing. That's because there is no material for it. Okay, so I'm going to go into shading. All right, and click O or 0, and it's going to come up with this, which is selecting viewport shading, which we don't want at the moment anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and click new, and it creates this principal volume and material output connected to volume. Okay, so now if I click on this, it still shows up with nothing. So if I now increase the black body intensity to 1000, say for an example, yeah, something's coming up, but it's taking quite a long time. I'm just going to go ahead and check. Oh, it's on CPU. I want to change this to GPU. Okay, slightly better. I have a reasonable GPU. I have RTX 2080 Max-Q, and my machine is Alienware M15 Core i9. Just in case you wanted to know. All right, that's what we get at the moment, which is not very good. Let me just get a render view. Okay, it's gonna kill me. Right. So, okay. So, how do we get from this render to this render? Okay. So, first thing is first. I'm gonna get rid of this, and down here, under this camera tab, color management, you currently have sRGB, XYZ, none, etc., etc. Okay, we can't use that. We don't want to use that. We want ACES color space. For that, if you go into Google and type in ACES 1.1 download, you're gonna get this one. So if you click on it, so it takes you to this GitHub page, and you've got a bunch of stuff. You can just click on this little arrow mark and download the zip. Okay, once you've done that, you should be able to see these files downloaded, and we're going to use ACES 1.1. Now, where do we store it so that it shows up in Blender here? First of all, I'm going to close this. Okay, and I'm going to open up a new window. I'm going to C drive, program files, Blender Foundation 2.93, 2.93 again. Blender 2.93, 2.93 data files, color management. In here is where it is. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy what is inside of ACES 1.1. Copy all of that. And before I paste, I'm just going to create a new folder called OCIO. And I'm just going to move these three elements into here. Okay, and now I'm going to paste. Okay, so it's downloaded it, pasted it, and it's identical to that. Okay, so that's that, and I'm going to close them. And I'm going to go ahead and close these as well. I'm going to leave this for reference. When you open Blender, it's going to throw an error saying you can't find that in this. Don't worry about that. Okay, I'm going to open our file. Okay, so here's the file. And now you got the display device under color management as ACES. Okay, it's not sRGB anymore up here. It's ACES, all right, and that's what you need. All right, so let's now click on this render here. It still doesn't look great, right? It looks I guess, much redder now compared to before. Okay. All right. So let's move on. In fact, what I should have done is I should have taken a screenshot of it. I'll tell you what, I will actually take a render of it and save it somewhere. Wait a second. I'm just going to change this to 50% and do a render. Okay, that's taking quite a while. So I'm going to go ahead and close. I'm going to go ahead and close, shut off the grid for it. Okay, there you go. Shut that off now. So let me save it and render it again. Okay, so that took 3 minutes and 32 seconds, and that's how it looks, which is not very good. So I'm just going to change it to slot number 2. I'm going to move on. All right. So that's not very good, obviously. So let's set this up. All right. So first is I'm going to just get rid of that for now. I'm going to bring in an attribute node. And let's call in temperature. And bring in a color ramp. Okay. Connect the color to factor and color to volume. But that's not going to work. So we do need the principled volume shader. And you put that in there and you collect that to emission color. Okay. Because we are using emission color, we don't need black body intensity or a black body tint. Okay, for this one at least. All right, so I'm going to save that. I'm just going to click on this here and see what happens. Okay, so nothing is showing up. And that is probably because we need to remap the range that's coming in. I know the range is about 0 to 10 temperature values. Okay, so I'm going to put in a type in range. Okay, there you go. Map range. Okay, connect it. All right, good. So I'm going to change this to 0 to 10. 0 to 10. Okay, that hasn't really made any difference. I'm just going to unclamp it. All right, if I change this to 0 to 1 to 0 to 10. Okay, still nothing. That's all right. Have I got this right? Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Oh, emission strength, of course. So I'm just going to switch it to 1. Yeah, there you go. No, I forgot about that. Okay, so if I switch it to 0 to 10 to 0 to 10, yeah, you're seeing something. All right, that's okay. So let's set the color ramp. So I'm just going to pull this in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and move this to 0.05. Okay. And we're going to click on here and click plus. So it creates a new one in between these. For this one, I know the values already, so I'm just going to punch them in, 0.796. That's the value. And the color for this is RGB value, red 1, blue is 0.3, sorry, green is 0.3, and red is 0.1. Okay, so we've got something like that. That is good. The next one, I want to click it here again and click on plus. All right, created one there. On this one, I would like to create it at 0.95 right there. And RGB values. 1 for red is fine. Green, I want 0.413. Then blue is 0.1. Okay, that looks good. And the last but not least, I don't want any whites in here. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to green to 0.6 and blue to 0.1. Please also bear in mind that this only works for this particular fire you get from Axiom and Houdini. Okay, you can try it out with Blender. I am planning to release another tutorial for Blender Fire itself, the simulation. But that's going to be slightly different to this one, all right? But not much, really. Okay, lastly, I'm going to change this to B-spline. So everything is B-spline, all right? Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so the intensity currently isn't that much, so let me just pull this down a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to change the emission strength to 4. And let's see what that... Okay, so that looks more promising right now. Okay, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to put in a vector math node or multiply. Do you have vector multiply? It's only math. Okay. All right. Yeah, there you go. Multiply. Okay, so that disappeared. I'm going to just give it 8, 8, and 8. This one, you can actually play with this so that, like, for example, if you change the blue, RGB blue, you know, you get different results here, but it's up to you. I'm going to leave it at 8 for now. Okay. Okay. What I want to do though is I also want to make use of the black body intensity. Okay, so I'm going to copy or Shift D maybe. Yeah, that's right. Oh no, don't do that. If I press Shift D and move it down here, yeah, there you go. And let's create a mix shader and mix this one with this one. And yeah, it's all gone bust right now, but that's okay. I'm going to increase the temperature to 1200. And these values I played with quite a lot, so you can play with it later if you like. Okay. I'm going to change the emission strength to 0 because we're not using emission color here. Okay. We're going to use black body intensity, and that's going to be 0.250 or 25. Okay, good. So now we've got these two. What I want to do is I want to input the temperature as our factor here. All right. And I'll show you the difference at the end. Okay, so that's our shader really set up, to be honest. And have we got that? Yeah, that's fine. So I'm just going to move on to density here, and it's currently sitting at 1. That's not very good. And this is what I mentioned at the start of the tutorial. I put in a density value here, which I did not in Redshift. So obviously you can try that out as well on that one. Okay, so I'm going to put in a 40 here. Suddenly, it looks a lot promising. So if I were to, let's say, for example, get rid of this, I don't think you'll see much of a difference because it's mapped from 0 to 10 to 0 to 10. However, if you do want control, then this gives you a lot of control. Like, for example, if you want to say, oh, well, I only want it 0 to 10 to 0 to 1, then, you know, you got some control over it. That's why you got this node right here. All right, good. So that's our shader done. I'm going to go ahead and set up the rest of them, okay? If you're here only for this, then basically, you know, the shader is done. But I'm going to go ahead and show you the fastest way of rendering it as well, because for this setup at least, okay? Because if you remember, the first one took 3 minutes and 32 seconds, and this is only a 50% of 1080 HD. Obviously, it's going to, this time is going to increase once you add the grid, all right? So anyway, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to go and set up the grid right now. Oh, actually, before I set up the grid, I may want to do another render of this shot, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I will come back. Okay, so the rendering is now done. It took 4 minutes and 38 seconds. That's a lot of time for, half the HD resolution. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and choose slot 1 from here to here. Now that is a significant difference. And this fire looks pretty good to me. Alright, so before I move on, I'm just going to change this slot 3 before I forget. Okay, so before I move on, I just want to get this back to rendering and go into rubber toy. Oh, not rubber toy, sorry, fire cache. And I want you to concentrate on this region here. Oh, okay, come on. So if you concentrate on this region down here, okay. Now if I were to connect this straight to volume, bypassing this principal shader, you'll see that's how it looks. Okay, and that's what I didn't want. I didn't want it to look like that. You could have changed this to white, this part here, but it's not going to look as good. Alright, and that's why I chose to use both of these shaders. So you get hotter regions here and there, and up here as well, I think. Yeah, you see up here as well, you got some hotter regions up here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Alright, so hopefully you got that. I'm just gonna hit back. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and set up the grid, and I'll set up the rubber toy after that. So click new. I'm not gonna go fancy with these things, so I'm just gonna change the metallic to 1, and really that's about it. And rubber toy is exactly the same, so I might as well, I think, what is this? This is material 2, so I'm going to go ahead and choose material 2 for this as well. Okay, I'm going to do one more render and I'll come back. I think this will take a little bit longer than previously, and then we will look at how to get faster renders without losing quality or losing very little amount of quality. Okay, so the rendering is done. That took a whopping 7 minutes and 55 seconds for a 640 resolution. That's half HD, that's a lot of time. If you look at slot 2, it's 438, slot 1 is 332. This gotten really worse. Okay, so anyway, so that's how it looks like. It's because it's had to calculate, it's got to calculate the GI and the bounces and whatnot. Alright, I'm going to change it to slot 4. We're going to move straight into optimizing the render engine. Alright, okay, first thing I want to do is go into edit, preferences. In here you can see I'm using RTX 2080 with Max-Q design. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and enable Intel Core i9 as well. Before that, I want to actually show you this. This is the task manager, and this is the amount of utilization of the GPU while it was rendering. Now, I'm not really sure why that is. It's like it's barely using any. All right, and this is my NVIDIA GPU. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the CPU here. That's the utilization of CPU. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and enable both of these, and optics is enabled as well, so that's fine. And I'm going to close that, and let's look at some of these. All right, so I'm going to leave render at 128, which is pretty good. I'm going to enable adaptive sampling, and I'm going to leave these as they are. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and enable denoising on both viewport. We're not going to use viewport anymore, but I'm going to enable that anyway, and I'm going to choose optics for both. Alright, good, they're all fine. I'm not going to touch anything on advanced. Okay, that's good. Light paths, I'm going to leave them all they are, as the way they are, except for this volume. Maximum number of volumetric scattering events, I'm going to change that to 4. This may actually increase the render time, but don't worry about that because we're gonna fix that shortly. So I'm not gonna do any of this. I think this could be a new feature in 293. I'm not sure, but I'm not gonna enable it. I'm gonna go into volumes. This is what makes a huge difference. All right, so this one, globally adjust detail for volume rendering on top of automatically estimated step size. Higher values reduce render time, lower values render with more detail. And I'm going to change these to 4. And that's quarter of the quality, really. Okay, I'm going to leave them as they are. I'm going to enable motion blur, although I know motion blur isn't really working for volume. So, and performance, I'm going to uncheck auto tile size. I'm going to change these both to 128 and 128. Okay, because for some reason, if I choose auto tile size, it's taking much longer. Okay, that's good. And I'm going to use spatial splits, longer build time, but faster render, right? So I'm going to use that. And this is a new feature. I don't think I found any difference in checking persistent data. Keep render data around for faster re-renders and animation renders at the cost of increased memory usage. I'm going to check that anyway, all right, even though it didn't make any difference. Maybe in animation it does, I don't know. Okay. So pixel size, they are all fine. Bake is fine. None of that I'm going to change. Color management, this is fine. Okay, this is pretty good. All right, good. I'm gonna just check these ones. Okay, obviously you want to select the output, but I'm not gonna do that right now. You can do that. I usually select multi-EXR. And I'm going to check preview because it gives you a JPG preview image, which is very useful. So I'm going to check that. So you know what? I'm just going to save this output somewhere. All right, give me a second. Yeah, I just called it whatever, and dot underscore s, hash dot exr. Okay, that's good. And I want to make sure it's full float so we can get the full color detail. And next thing is, I'm going to uncheck combined and Z. I don't need that. I mean, you can choose it, of course. I'm going to check these. I'm not going to show you compositing on this one, but I usually use these, okay? Particularly volume, direct and indirect. But remember, there will be noisy images compared to the denoised image. Okay, I'm going to select emission, ambient occlusion, and finally cryptomatte object. Yeah, I think that's about it. I think we are pretty much done here. Right, I'm going to go ahead and give this a render and I will come back. I want you to notice how it's got more tiles now, and if I go into Task Manager, the CPU utilization has gone up and the GPU is pretty much looks the same. I know it's gone out of the window here, but the GPU utilization looks pretty much the same. All right, good. So, okay, the rendering is now done. Look at the time. It's 1 minute and 25 seconds compared to 7 minutes and 55 seconds. That is a significant difference. And guess what? If I zoom in, you'll barely see any difference, all right? And it looks far better anyway. Of course, the denoise has come into play here. Okay, so please watch that as well. All right, good. So that is pretty much done. I'm just going to do a final HD version render, and let me actually, you know what? Let me actually do another render without denoising on, and I'll show you the difference. It won't take that long, to be honest. Where is it? Okay, I'm going to kill the denoising for the render. Okay. Yeah, I changed to slot 5. That's good. Render. Okay, so it's done now. This is the noisy image. It took 1 minute and 24 seconds. And if I compare that to slot 3, there you go. There's the difference. Slot 3 and slot 5. It's slightly lighter up here. compared to slot 3. But I'll tell you what, I actually like slot 5 a lot more. Obviously, if I look at slot 4, I forgot that I actually have noisy image right here as well. So I didn't have to re-render it. But anyway, so that's slot 3 and there's slot 4. If you're happy with this, and go ahead, you could save significant amount of time, or you could choose to, so let me just get back to combine. You could choose to, let me just put this back to 6 and enable optics and go to render volume. You can change this step rate to 2 for an example, right? But I'm going to leave it at, I'm going to leave it at 4. And if I look at slot 5, slot 4, and go to slot 5, and I'm going to render a full HD image right now, and I'm going to show you, and that's pretty much the end of it. Okay, so the rendering is done now. It took 6 minutes and 12 seconds for an HD resolution image. That looks incredible, I think. That looks pretty good. Also bear in mind, I'm doing screen recording, so this time could be because of that, because I think when I rendered this out, I actually got 4 minutes and 12 seconds approximately, I think, somewhere like that. So I'm going to go ahead and do another render, but this time I'm going to kill the screen recording and I'll come back. Okay, the rendering is now done. As you can see, it took 5 minutes and 3 seconds, and previously it was 6 minutes and 12 seconds. So we saved just around about 1 minute and 9 seconds now, which is great. Also, I just remembered it was 4:12 in my original render was because there was an anamorphic 2:39 ratio, which means that my settings were 920 by 804. Okay, not 1080. All right, good. So this is the end of the tutorial. I hope this video helped you. If it did, please give me a like, thumbs up, comment, share, and subscribe. If you can have a look at my Gumroad page as well. I've got some files in there if you want to purchase. I really appreciate it. I will put this file on Gumroad as well. And if you've already purchased Axiom series, you will get this update for free. Okay? All right. Until next time, thank you very much. Have a great day.